Hey there. So the rotator cuff is technically only 4 muscles, but there are 17 muscles that influence the scapula, and the shoulder is so much more than the rotator cuff. But all I've got is some body paint, a patient friend, and about 6 minutes on a YouTube video. So let's go. This video highlights 4 muscles of the shoulder, not the rotator cuff muscles, but 4 muscles that you could see on the posterior aspect of my friend's left shoulder if we were to peel away her skin. 3 of these muscles actually do happen to be a member of the rotator cuff club, but that doesn't mean that the other muscles don't want to join this party, and sometimes they just crash the party because that's how stubborn muscles can be. My point is, when we talk about the shoulder, we often talk about the rotator cuff, and sometimes we assume that a lot of dysfunction lays there. But like I said before, there are 17 muscles that influence the scapula, and fun fact, there are no muscles that influence the shoulder as a whole that don't actually touch the scapula. Everybody wants in on this floating bone. The fact that the scapula floats is, I think, what makes it so desirable for all these surrounding muscles. It's kind of like you're at your neighborhood party and a celebrity drives up in some fancy car and everybody wants to get close enough to see. The truth is that it takes a lot of effort to hold this bone in place and to keep it functioning in a way that doesn't create an entire pain response for the human it belongs to. So whether or not any of these muscles are technically a part of the rotator cuff doesn't mean that they're not straining to hang on, and doesn't mean that they don't have their own role in whatever shoulder dysfunction might be going on, because the list of shoulder dysfunctions is expansive. In the same way that all of these muscles want to get their hands on the scapula, the rotator cuff has climbed its way up the social ladder to the point where it is the elite talk of the town when it comes to shoulder pain. Kind of like that juicy bit of gossip that won't go away, it just seems to roll off the tongue when shoulder pain presents itself. Don't get me wrong, the rotator cuff is really cool. It's a collection of 4 muscles that hang on to the head of the humerus in such a way that they all have to work together to create this amazing movement that the shoulder does, but also to keep that humerus in place. But isn't that the job of the deltoids, you might be asking? Yeah, not so much. The deltoids are just there to look really cool. The reality is that each of the tendons of the rotator cuff muscles attaches themselves in such a way to the head of the humerus, up at the top of the humerus, so that their job is to stabilize this bone in place. All of the other attachments along the humerus tend to fall farther down the bone, and so what they do is more important than the actual stabilization. The 3 rotator cuff muscles that I've included in this painting are the supraspinatus, the infraspinatus, and the teres minor. And then at the bottom, I've also included the teres major, which is the one muscle I feel like would want to be a part of the rotator cuff more than any other muscle. Like, it would probably be their #1 groupie, or like president of the rotator cuff fan club. But instead, it's been linked to the latissimus dorsi muscle and been given the rather condescending nickname of Lat's little helper. Granted, it does do exactly what the lats do, but it's like the big brother to the teres minor. Poor teres major. The only other rotator cuff muscle I did not include is the subscapularis, and mainly because I couldn't figure out how to manage getting that one into this painting. But I did manage to get part of the lats on there and some obliques, the paraspinals, and the rhomboids off to the side. The big picture here for me, though, is the unbelievable, fantastic arrangement of fibers in different directions that they fall to allow the scapula to float around the rib cage and to give the shoulder the freedom to do all of the things that a shoulder does. The last thing I want to note here to knock the rotator cuff off of its high horse is that the word cuff usually refers to the word wrist, which is at the opposite end of the arm. And it's also taken from the Old English word to mean mitten or glove. So the rotator cuff has no business calling itself a cuff. Maybe they should have called it rotator support crew or rotator spotlight hog. Point being, all of these muscles that pull and tug at the scapula and ultimately have a role in how well the shoulder does what it does deserve a little attention when somebody announces that they have shoulder pain. Trigger points from the rhomboids can refer down the arm. Tension from the lats and its little helper, the teres major, can pull and strain at the teres minor and the infraspinatus. A tight serratus anterior can limit the supraspinatus, and the list goes on. Just remember this: if you're working with a client who has no formal diagnosis of a rotator cuff injury, listen to their story and explore what's going on underneath their skin. Remember that soft tissue dysfunction can be a multifaceted mess of layers and dimensions. The shoulder and its complicated display of muscle awesomeness is the prime example of what it means to be human.